Hi everyone, I'm Ritika Biswas. I'm the co-curator of the upcoming edition of the Bengal Biennale. I'm an independent curator and artistic researcher. I work mostly with ecology, necropolitics, and questions and systems of justice. Even though I've worked as both an institutional and independent curator across not just white cube spaces, but a lot of public space, a lot of ecological spaces, difficult and rugged terrain sometimes to produce festivals and Biennale pavilions and so on, I think it's particularly exciting to work with Chaderhat because they understand the lived fabric and topography of West Bengal so well, both through their individual artistic praxis as well as their work in Shorshuna with local communities and their Durga Pujo practice, which has spanned several decades at this point. So it's, I think, going to be quite a singular and intriguing take on a Biennale because it's quite rare that an artist collective and an independent curator sort of come together and form this sort of transgenerational, intergenerational, and very multidisciplinary sort of approach to a Biennale. So that's been particularly exciting. The theme for this year is Bonolata for the second edition of the Bengal Biennale. So this draws upon a prolific poem in the Bengali consciousness and literary oeuvre by Jibanananda Das, which is called Bonolata Shen. This poem, among other things, sort of depicts this narrative of a very weary traveler who's traveled many seas and lands and has been traveling for thousands of years and is incredibly weary and exhausted by the battering of life and waves and troubles and tribulations, and finds a moment of rest in this sort of strange eco-feminist life force called Bonolata Shen. So the reason the Biennale draws from this poem is not necessarily about the specifics of the poem, but much more so about how do we form and find allies and kinships within darknesses, within times of strife, within times of tribulation. How do we sit with one another, not necessarily to lead each other out into the light, out of the darkness in any sort of cliched way, but how do we then within these spaces, these underground or dark spaces, find new strategies through which we can create generative architectures, ecologies, strategies for contending with perhaps the difficulty of all of these plural darknesses. I think it's really important for us to think about the emotional texture of what a Biennale is, to provide spaces of rest, to provide spaces of metabolizing and catalyzing thought for the audiences, not simply to create a sort of like barrage of sensorial overload for audiences as Biennales can often be. So I think that is how we're designing and thinking of the Biennale as a restful and still generative ecology.